Hello. Hello, hello. Happy Monday. Um, oh, my voice is scratchy. Let's give everybody a second to come on in. Say hi when you join in so I know you're here. Let me know if you can hear me. Give me a thumbs up. It's a little bit after 3. I'm running a little bit late for our Facebook Live start, but thank you for joining us. Hi, Jen. I see a couple people have joined us. Let me know who's here. Let me know your name. Say hi. And I'm sorry, my voice is scratchy today. Hi, Christy. All right, we're going to talk about anxiety today. Hello. So you see I have a different backdrop today. Wait, let me go this way. My turtles are going to be hanging out with us today. I was joking with my friend Jen beforehand. I wasn't really joking, actually. I sent her a picture. My basement. So I usually do my Facebook Lives down in the basement by my bookshelf and kind of where I podcast. It's really just out of the way in our unfinished basement. But we have been in survival mode for weeks right now. And everything has kind of matriculated, is that the right word? Has gravitated towards the basement and is piled up everywhere. I literally could not walk into the room of the basement where I usually do these Facebook Lives to get to my desk to clear it off to be able to do these lives. So my kids are currently sequestered in my bedroom with their Kindles and Minecraft. And they're all connected together in this one, I don't know, they call it the Kessler world. It's their server, but it's really just them connected in one world on Wi-Fi. And so we can all keep our fingers crossed that nobody destroys somebody else's building or whatever and sends someone screaming into here. So sorry about, I don't know if you can hear the filter in the aquarium, and sorry about the distraction of the turtle swimming back behind us. But this is where we are today. So we're doing the best we can, right? And it's kind of fun. I actually think it's soothing. I love the turtles because we can just sit and watch them. They're kind of funny and quirky. And actually, usually, they'll kind of come right up to the tank if they see me. So I'm surprised. Let's see, is he going to come? I'm surprised that he's ignoring me as much as he is. Oh, there he goes. So he might be visiting you. Hey, Melissa. Oh, okay. Well, I hope you have a good day. I know it's crazy. And we may need to evaluate at some point here a different time for these because, hi, Leslie, because when I first started doing the Facebook Lives, I had scheduled them for Mondays because I didn't have anything on Mondays. It was our only free day of the week. And since that time, my daughter's occupational therapy and physical therapy has switched days and times. And actually, we hadn't been doing physical therapy, so we added that to it. And so it gets to be a little bit of crazy on Mondays where it wasn't before. So I'm going to think about that. But right now, we're just going to stick with it, and we will roll with it as best we can. Hi, Carol. This is a red-eared slider, and I have a second red-eared slider up in the basking area right now. We had 3. I don't know, some of you may have remembered I was posting on my personal page in the Raising Poppies group, as well as here on Raising Lifelong Learners. We had to get rid of one of our turtles because the 2 that are remaining were ganging up on him. Oh my gosh. Okay, how do I pronounce it? Is it Emily? Emily from the UK. It's 8 p.m. there. Oh my gosh, I wish it was 8 p.m. here. I'm ready for bed already. But thank you for coming. So anyway, we had to get rid of one of our turtles. So there's just 2 in there right now. They are rescues. We rescued them from a classroom teacher who had been given them and had them in our classroom for a while in a teeny tiny tank, way too small for 3 red-eared sliders. And so we got this tank, it's huge, and put them in it, and they have just thrived. We've had them 5 years now, and they've grown and grown and grown. And as happens with turtles, They become territorial once, if they have enough room to swim around, they'll leave each other alone pretty much. But once they start to grow, they need more space. And so they started picking on the weaker one. And it got to a point where like they were hanging, like pulling him underwater to try to drown him. So we had to save him. And he is actually living happily in the biology teacher's classroom at my husband's, at the high school in the district where my husband teaches. So the biology department was really happy to get him, and we're super excited that he went to a good home and we can go visit him, because my kids were a little bit sad when they had to give up one of them. So hi, Josie. Oh, your son had sliders too. I think they're great pets. They're quirky. They're interesting. They have personality, believe it or not. As far as reptiles go, I think they're pretty cool. And they're actually not super high maintenance. As long as, you have the filter and keep it clean. They're pretty easy to take care of. Okay, so sorry about that digression here. They're actually good. How's this for a segue? They're actually good for kids with anxiety, because I know my little one, my 8-year-old, who struggles with anxiety quite a bit, can just she'll sit on the couch right next to them, right over here. The couch goes right up against the tank, and she'll just sit for hours and watch them, especially if she just needs to calm down because they're quirky. Okay, last thing, I'll talk about the turtles because it's fun to talk about someone who has them. Yes, Carol, actually, my kids love feeding them live fish. So my kids are not squeamish about nature. They're very nature oriented. They understand the whole hierarchy of life and everything. And while they love fish and have kept fish as pets before, we mostly feed these guys pellets, but usually like twice a year, we'll give them, maybe even a little bit more often, we'll give them a big bag of feeder fish. And my kids love it. They love watching the turtles hunt and grab the fish. They name the fish things like, steak dinner and baked potato and spaghetti and meatballs and cheer the turtles on. So there you go. There's a little bit of the darkness in the Kessler family. But interestingly, I promise this will be the last thing about the turtles. This is not a Facebook Live about turtles. But for the longest time, they had a fish that they kind of adopted. And they lived in an almost symbiotic relationship with it. And it got to be like about this big. It started as a feeder fish, like about this big, and it got to be about this big. It lived in there for about 3 years until one day the turtles turned on it. But it was there a long, long time. It would eat the dead skin off of the turtles and scavenge at the bottom of the tank for food. And actually, it would kind of herd the feeder fish towards the turtles, probably in a move of self-preservation. But my kids enjoyed it. And they were really, really upset when the turtles finally, when their nature took over and they ganged up on that fish. So anyway, all right. We can talk more about turtles later. Maybe I'll just, have Trevor do a Facebook Live one day and tell you all that he knows about turtles. So we're going to talk about anxiety today. And it's a topic that comes up often. I'm going to try not to say So little background. I have 2 kids, both 2 of my 4, and I'm saying again. 2 of my 4 have anxiety. They struggle with anxiety. And it's a battle for us, and we work on it often. One of them saw a therapist for a really long time, and the other is seeing one now. So we are very well versed with, not really well versed, because I don't think you can ever be fully well versed with anxiety, because it always manifests itself differently. Like just when you think you have it under control or you think you know what to look for, it'll throw you for a loop. Hey, Melissa. Yeah, Nan, it's a big, big mug. So my husband went on a trip to Seattle one year for, work. It was a teacher's conference or something, and he went to the first Starbucks, and he brought this back for me. And I'm telling you, I need this coffee right now. So I promise I won't digress too much today, but little background. Last week, this Facebook Live was canceled because right before I was scheduled to go live, my 4-year-old threw up, and then he was fine the whole rest of the day, and so I thought it was just a fluke. Well, the next morning he woke up like lethargic, and he had 104 temperature. He pretty much laid in my lap all day. So Tuesday we spent just on the couch last week, and then Wednesday he was better. Thursday he was fine. We did our normal co-op stuff. My daughter is in my 10-year-old daughter is in a production of Annie right now, and it's a 6-week run. We're right smack dab in the middle of it. She's got 2 more weekends. They have Thanksgiving week off, but she's got 2 more weekends, and so we've been spending hours and hours at the theater, and so she's been battling, and she's been really fatigued and taking lots of naps. Hi, Joanne from Spain. Wow. Thank you so much for joining us. That's exciting. And anyway, so we've been kind of in survival mode. The house is a little bit of a wreck. I went grocery shopping for the first time in 3 weeks yesterday. We've been like subsisting on whatever I could find in the pantry or whatever my husband could like pick up on the way home. And so he went down last week, and over the weekend, my 8-year-old went down, and my 4-year-old's fighting a cold again. I've got a scratchy throat. It's just, I think it's mostly like the theater dust and stuff. My daughter's got a scratchy voice or scratchy throat, and we're just all kind of struggling. My daughter, my 8-year-old, spiked a fever last night. She was up with me with a croupy cough all night. So we are kind of hibernating during the week here, and I'm just kind of I've been putting out fires for 3 weeks, and I think that I'm just taking this week to not put out any more fires and just tackle one thing at a time. The upstairs got cleaned today. Be working on the downstairs later this week. I've got groceries finally, a meal plan in place. We did like game schooling today. We watched a lot of Wild Kratts. They played games. They built a Rube Goldberg kit we had. And then now they're playing Minecraft together, and we'll probably watch a documentary this afternoon after I'm done talking. But we're not doing a whole heck of a lot of anything because we're surviving. So anyway, all that being said, let's talk about anxiety. So a lot of you are probably like me, have kids that struggle with that otherwise, or you just want to know more about it, or you're wondering if your kiddos are struggling with it. A lot of kids are struggling with anxiety. And there's various reasons for that. We're going to talk particularly today about gifted kids and twice exceptional kids and why they tend to have a little bit more anxiety and what kinds of things we can do to help them as parents. I'm going to say this, I've said it before, I'll say it again, probably dozens and dozens of times throughout my talks and the blog posts I write and the things that I share. I'm not the be-all, end-all expert on any of this. I have a master's degree in gifted. I taught gifted kids for over a decade. I speak about the topic. I read about it all the time. I'm always looking to learn more. I parent kids. One who is officially identified as profoundly gifted, 3 who I'm sure fall along that spectrum at some point, 2 of whom have diagnosed anxiety. And I'm just kind of in the trenches with you, doing this thing, learning as much as I can to be the best parent I can be to my kids and helping other parents along the way. So we're in this together. I want you to know that, and I want you to know that probably a lot of the things that I'll talk about will be relatable to you. And there may be others that aren't because your kid doesn't do it, or their anxiety doesn't necessarily manifest itself in the same way that my kids do. So drop in questions, ask them. Yes, Emily. Ask questions. I'm sorry, I forgot to mute my texts, and a text just came across the computer. Attention issues. They're right here. They don't fall far from the tree in this house. Ask questions, drop them in there, talk to each other. I want this to be as interactive as possible. Okay, so Emily, let's start there. So gifted. So when we're talking about gifted kids, we're talking about kids who are intellectually, cognitively, academically, creatively gifted. And by that, I mean, and actually I'm mostly talking about cognitively gifted kids in this particular context. And those are kids and adults who, if we were looking at a straight IQ test, would be 2 standard deviations or more beyond average on the IQ scale. So if we're looking at the bell curve, average is in the middle, right? Right there, that's where most kids fall. 2 standard deviations below tends to be where kids who struggle or have other issues, neurological, psychological, physical, without academic or intellectual giftedness fall. And then kids who are 2 standard deviations above average on the distribution plot of that bell curve are academically, academically gifted. And so that's when we're just talking about the straight IQ scale. The thing where you get the nuances in there are when, because that wiring is different, their brains are wired neurologically differently than average, right? Smack in the middle. They are just as differently wired as kids who are, on the other side of the bell curve. So they also often have some of the same struggles. So they could, so that's when we get into twice exceptional. We get kids who are gifted, intellectually gifted, have a greater capacity for learning or a quicker capacity for learning, but also may struggle with I gotta turn off these notifications. I'm sorry. For some reason, my texts are blowing up right now. And so we are gonna go up there, if I can remember how to do it, and click do not disturb. Okay, there we go. Real life, guys. And so twice exceptional kids are kids who are gifted and also have some kind of neurological, psychological, learning, or physical disability. So I hope that clarifies it a little bit, Emily. There are some posts on my site. Gosh, what is giftedness? Understanding the academically gifted child, understanding the cognitively gifted child, understanding the creatively gifted child, as well as a couple other ones that I'm forgetting the names of. So you can search gifted on my site, raisinglifelonglearners.com, and you can pull up a lot. And then if you want, I can come back here and drop some more resources in here for you. I'm going to scroll back to see what I missed here. Thanks, Wendy. Anxiety. Okay, so Deanna says that she's getting concerned about anxiety and perfectionism in her 11-year-old son. And then Leslie also says, she's asking if I find that therapy works more or differently than having read tons of anxiety books at home. Yeah, okay. And Shannon's asking about the gallons of the tank. I don't remember. I think it's an 80-gallon tank. Okay. So Dana and Leslie, I'm going to tackle both of those. I'm going to start with Leslie. I think therapy works differently, and I think it's super important in a lot of cases for our gifted kids. But I'm going to say that with a caveat. It's really, really important if we have gifted children that we're seeking behavioral psychologists or psychiatrists who have a background in an understanding of experience with gifted children. Okay, and let me put that in a little bit of context, and then Dana, I'm going to come back to your question or your comment. So I went to school originally to be an elementary teacher. So going for elementary education with the goal of being in a regular education classroom with all of those different kinds of kids. I learned a lot about classroom management, doing different things, teaching different types of subjects in different ways. I took a special needs class because that wasn't my focus. I took, understanding how to identify child abuse and those kinds of things, lots of different classes. They don't offer, or they may offer them, but it's not required in your elementary education degree to get or take a class on giftedness. When I graduated with my elementary education degree, I had been exposed to giftedness in one class, the special ed class, the special needs class, in that one textbook, in one paragraph in that textbook. So the vast majority of the people who are in our schools teaching our kids have that same experience with giftedness that I had. I went back and I got a master's degree in gifted education because, well, there were lots of reasons for that. Ultimately, it was the path of education I felt most led towards. There's a lot I love about that, and I could talk about that another time. But it wasn't until I specialized in giftedness that, I'm sorry, there's a package delivered. Excuse me one second. Hey, Trevor. So we get we're in a neighborhood that things disappear off the front porch. So we usually get packages delivered to our side door. Somebody just delivered a package to our front door. You can pop your head in if you want to say hi.
Oh, hello.
Okay, so go out and get it and then go back in the bedroom. And then make sure you lock the door behind you so no one pops in. Okay, sorry about that. Real life interrupted. Yeah, we usually get that was a different delivery person. I don't know who that was or what it is, but okay, sorry, distraction. This is why I do Facebook Lives in the basement usually. So anyway, that was my exposure. Now, I don't have a psychology degree, so I don't know exactly what exposure psychologists or psychiatrists get to giftedness. I would hope that it just set it in the kitchen, please. Thank you. And then go ahead and sequester yourself back in Minecraft world. See ya. Thank you. I would imagine it's very similar, probably, hopefully, more than one paragraph in one textbook. But unless a psychologist chooses to specialize in giftedness, they're going for that holistic degree in psychology. So when we're talking about differently wired children, and we're talking about taking them to see somebody who could help them through therapy, we want to get somebody who really, really understands the way the gifted mind works. I say this also with experience. My oldest saw 2 different psychologists before we found the third one, who was a godsend. She got him. She understood when he played with answers to questions that she was asking because his mind was going in different directions. And whereas another child would have answered in a more straightforward way and given her the information that she was seeking in a very black and white kind of way. And she adjusted, was able to adjust her therapy and her conversations to his mind. She was a mom of 2 profoundly gifted sons, probably had grown up gifted as well. Understood that there was a difference there, and then went back for additional training in giftedness. The school psychiatrist at the district where I worked had a master's degree in giftedness as well as her psychiatric degree. So you're going to want to do a little bit of looking around, asking if you're in our Raising Poppies group, ask if anybody sees somebody that they're confident in the area in which you live. Hoagie's Gifted, HOAGIES gifted.org is a resource that has a couple pages on it that lists psychologists and psychiatrists who have been recommended by other parents of gifted kids in different areas in the country. So you're going to want to do a little bit of research. So Dana, my long answer to your concern is that it might be time to seek somebody, because I really do think gifted kids particularly benefit from talking to somebody, a counselor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist at some point, because their mind just works so differently than the norm. And the further they are from that center of the bell curve, the more differently wired they are, so the more differently their brain processes their world. So it always is, I think, better to err on the side of caution and give them somebody that's safe to talk to, that can help them muddle through. It's not a bad thing. And then so Leslie, I think therapy works great in addition to reading those books and keeping those conversations going in your house. And then it also helps you know when or if medication is the right course. So in full disclosure, we don't medicate our children right now because therapy's worked and the interventions that we've done at home have worked enough that that we haven't had to go that route. That being said, we did go that route when my son was younger for impulsivity and attention. I've written about it on my site, not at length, and I probably should write about it more. It was not a success for us. It's been a success for other people with whom I've had conversations with and have talked to at length. It was not a good fit for us. We find more success with behavioral interventions, and actually my son drinks coffee to help kind of still his mind. I do too, as evidenced by my extra large cup. So it's something to think about. I always think that if you're concerned enough to be considering therapy, then it's worth going to look into, because I think kids can benefit from it. Okay, so I see some people that I know joined. Hi, Pat and Diana, Carol. Okay, magnesium. Yes, magnesium actually helps us too. My kids take a magnesium supplement. I'd say I'm not a doctor, so check with your doctor before you go any supplement route if you're concerned about that, or do your own research. I've done ours, and I've talked to doctors. And then, like Carolyn says in hers, other vitamins are needed in conjunction with magnesium to help the absorption rate. So yeah, definitely do your homework, both when you're looking at prescription meds and or when you're looking at supplementals. I mean, and honestly, do your homework when you're looking at behavioral interventions as well. All right, so let's see, Nina, your gifted kiddos in first grade. Okay, so she's talking about her kiddo being anxious when it comes to like being in the spotlight and having the attention on him. Reading aloud is a struggle. I know when I taught, many of my gifted kids shut down when they needed to take timed tests, because that added pressure of the time, even though they knew all their math facts easily. The anxiety spiked when it was under a time constraint. And yeah, I have lots of books and resources, Nina. First, though, let me say you're right. It is normal in that age, but it's also a little bit more intense when we're talking about gifted kids, which is why we're having a whole conversation about this issue of anxiety. So let me preface what I'm going to say next with that. Gifted kids struggle more often with anxiety than their neurologically typical peers, because they process the world differently. They process it more intensely. They feel things more deeply. They understand things at a higher cognitive level. So if they're watching a news program, they're understanding like the bigger picture, the ramifications of it, but maybe they're still emotionally immature enough not to be able to separate what's happening somewhere else in the world with their own backyard. And so their worries can get really, really big, and they struggle to, I'm sorry, see, I'm fighting it too. They struggle to pull it down. And in those cases as well, these kids aren't the kids that you're going to be able to just give a pat answer to, oh, don't worry about it, mommy's going to take care of you. They're not going to be satisfied with that, because they understand what could happen, what is happening, why things happen. And so they know that there may be a time when something happens and you're not there to protect them. So we can't give them those pat responses. We need to be able to validate their feelings, their worries, for what they are. They're very valid worries. What you're concerned about, honey, is absolutely something that you could be concerned about. Here's why I don't think it'll happen around here. Here's what we would do if it did happen and we were together. Here's what you could do if it did happen and we weren't together. And here's, where this is where fire safety talks are great for kids like this. If there's a fire, you leave the house and we meet at that maple tree. Where you're giving them the validation that bad things can happen, that it's okay to worry about them, and that we have a plan in place for dealing with those things when they do happen. Does that make sense? Does that help a little bit, Nina? And then books. Books are important. So there's a post on my site, helping books to help kids who worry, I think is the title of it. I also want you to know that sometimes worry doesn't look like worry to us. It doesn't look like the typical thing we think of when we think of anxiety. Cowering, crying, it doesn't always look like that. Sometimes it looks like anger. Sometimes it looks like extreme frustration. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it looks like depression, despair. Sometimes it looks like impulsivity. Sometimes it looks like attention deficit. Our hyperactivity. Our kids are really kind of a conundrum, right? They're full of paradoxes. These really bright kids, the way they're processing their things is more intense than others. The book I recommend most to start out with is Emotional Intensity in Gifted Kids. It's by Christine Fonseca. It's published by Proofreq Press, and we'll drop a link to it in the comments. It's a really great book to start with because it's an easy read. It's written for parents. Now, I know that my Facebook page and my blog followers and my Raising Poppies group, mine and Kate's Raising Poppies group, are split pretty much down the middle with people who homeschool and people who don't. So I want you to know, first of all, that I'm a proponent for whatever works best for you and your family. You all should know by now that I homeschool, and I didn't start out homeschooling, and I didn't plan to homeschool. It's what works best for our family right now. But if I could have made the school system where we were work, then that would have been what was best for us at that point. Emotional and intensity in gifted students is written from that perspective that your kids are in school, because that's where a lot of our resources are right now for parents of gifted kids, because the vast majority of our society have kids who go to school. I think it's an incredibly valuable read, whether your kids are in school or not. And it's a great starting point for talking with teachers and caregivers, co-op teachers, other parents with whom your kids spend time, about what kinds of things they see and feel. I have a post on my site, Books for Kids Who Worry. I have a post on my site, Books for Kids, I don't know, for who are angry, or to talk to kids about anger, something like that. They're full of picture books and resource books for parents. Another book that I really highly recommend is by, hold on, I'm gonna flip. It is by, I'm looking at Amazon right now, by Dan Peters. Dan Peters is a psychologist who works extensively with gifted kids and kids who struggle with anxiety. It's called Make Your Worrier a Warrior. That is the parent book. There's a companion kids book. What is the companion kids book? From Worrier to Warrior. It's a guide for kids to help them be, just to help them harness their worries. I'm sorry, I'm looking to see if, okay, I told you my texts are going crazy. Those books I recommend. If you are only going to choose, one or two, Emotional Intensity in Gifted Students is the first one I would suggest. Make Your Worrier a Warrior is the second one I would suggest. The parent book, because it gives you the talking points. If your child is one that would like to do kind of a book study with you, buy the kids one too and do it together. It's a really great book of talking points. Okay, let me see if I have some other questions, and we'll go from there. I think the key, though, first of all, is to helping your kids with their anxiety, whether it's diagnosed or not, is validating it first and foremost, validating their worries, letting them know that they're real, they're okay, and we're going to talk through it together. It's so important that they don't feel dismissed, especially smart kids. We don't want them to feel dismissed. And then teach them coping skills. Mindfulness, there's some great apps that have like guided stories, just taking some quiet down time. We use Zentangles in our house. There's a book that we like called A Zentangle a Day, I think it's called. Zentangles are great because they're kind of structured doodling. And they're actually really pretty with the shading and stuff you do, and you don't have to be a spectacular artist to do it, but they're very, very calming. They're calming for me. So they're super calming for our kids too. Giving them a calm down corner. I've got a couple posts on my site about creating calm down spaces for your kids. Oh, Wendy says that she has a bachelor's in psychology and had a master's in elementary education. So she's kind of verifying what I said earlier, that we just don't get the exposure to giftedness in those fields. It's more of a general overview. And so it's really the people who have gone back and gotten a specialized degree in giftedness that get it, or who have lived it, who have kids who are gifted or profoundly gifted. Here's a little confession. I've said this before in talks. One of my biggest regrets as a gifted intervention specialist, now I pride myself on having been a good teacher. I really listened to my kids. I listened to the parents. I talked to them. I was open. I was always willing to listen to their suggestions and try to work together. But I didn't fully get my gifted students until I had gifted kids of my own and was already out of the classroom. I understood a lot. I could take their curriculum and I could modify it. I could go to bat for them. I could advocate for them in the regular classroom. I could sit there and be an advocate in IEP and 504 meetings. I could consult with them and help them identify strengths and weaknesses. And I can still do all of those things, but I can do them with a deeper level of understanding now. It is very different living with a gifted or profoundly gifted, highly gifted kid day in and day out with all of the nuances that go along with it than it is teaching them for 6 to 8 hours a day and learning about it through books and field experiences. It's very different living with it. And that's not to say that all gifted kids, oh, my computer is not plugged in. Hold on. Sorry, I need to plug that back in. I was losing battery. It's not to say that all gifted kids struggle with anxiety and all gifted kids struggle with perfectionism and all gifted kids are irritable and struggle. And I wrote a post today about giftedness disguised and how there's a lot of mislabeling and misdiagnosis and misunderstanding amongst our gifted population. The kids are misunderstood and mislabeled and misdiagnosed. Not all are. There are some very, the reason there's a stereotype of giftedness as that kid who raises their hand all the time and answers all the questions is because some of them are like that. And those are the easiest ones to parent and teach and figure out. So if your kid doesn't struggle with these things, it doesn't mean that your kid's not gifted. It doesn't mean that your kid isn't highly able. But if your kid does struggle with these things, it doesn't mean your kid isn't gifted and isn't highly able either. We're trying to hone in on the differentiating factors, and it's hard because when you're dealing with neurological differences, kids and adults who are wired differently than the typical, like the main group of people, the main part of our population, they're just harder to understand because most people think in a certain way. And so they're not thinking in that way. And so they're not as easily understood as the vast majority of the population. It doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it bad. It just makes it different. That's what I tell my kids. Okay, so Caitlin, let me read yours. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going to read this out loud because I can so resonate with this, or it resonates with me. My kiddo told me walking into kindergarten testing that he was going to dismiss all the answers to have an easy year. At the conferences, I learned he wasn't even showing that he knew his letters. He's slowly showing what he knows at home, but she's lost on the why. At home, he's constantly asking questions like, does a cheetah run faster than a seal swims? How many groups of 4 make 20? How many 10s does it take to get to 100? His scores are high, but performance is different. Yeah, a lot of our kids, especially very, very bright ones, can be underachievers. And a lot of them figure that out at an early time. The why is that it's easier to blend in and just do what everyone else is doing than to feel like you're not getting what you need all the time. I had a great conversation with another parent this weekend and it was about that. It was, her kids go to school, they're identified gifted in the school system. They do pull out programs and things like that. But their real learning takes place at home, at museums and books and documentaries and experiences that they do as a family. And a lot of people say that. I was interviewed for a documentary that hopefully will be out in 2019. It's a Christian-based documentary called Schoolhouse Rocked. It's about homeschooling and kind of the revolution that's taking place in the homeschooling world. I talked about giftedness in there, and I talked about, how we came to be homeschoolers. Andrew Pudewa of IEW says, the Institute for Excellence in Writing, says something in there that it's in the trailer. That I'll have to share the trailer to the Facebook page. It's on my personal page right now. But he says that he remembers as a kid just being bored to tears at school and watching the clock, because his real life started when the school bell rang at the end of the day. That's when his real learning took place, and his real experiences and his real fun took place, and he was just biding time. I think a lot of our kids, like perhaps yours, Caitlin, are like that as well. Just biding time, doing what it takes to get by, because why do more? A lot of our kids struggle with, in their school systems, the MOTS approach to modifying gifted curriculum. And this was a joke that a lot of gifted intervention specialists that I met over the years when I was still teaching would say, oh yeah, they're doing the MOTS approach. MOTS, more of the same. So when our gifted kids finished work, a lot of our teachers were extending and enriching them, but basically just by giving them packets of more work. And so in those kinds of situations, our kids were learning, why bother doing it quickly and 100% and faster than the rest of the class, because I am just going to get more work. My son learned that during our medication trials in first grade before we pulled him out. He started finishing his work really quickly. His attention was laser focused. That part of the medication worked. We had some side effect issues. Like I said, I could go into those another time. But he figured out really, really quickly that there was no point to showing what he knew and how quickly he could grasp a concept, because when he did, he would just get a packet of extra work to do to kill time while the others caught up. It was not fun, and it wasn't something he wanted to do. So he just broke pencils and caused little disruptions and doodled and did a problem at a time as slowly as possible, so that he could finish right around when everybody else finished and he wouldn't get more work. He was bored silly. But and we, the short story of that is we ended up pulling him out because we knew it wasn't going to work in the current district that we were living in. But that's not the answer for everyone. I understand that. Shelly. Hi, Shelly. Are you still there? I haven't seen you in a long time. Melissa, Melinda, thanks for joining us. Okay. So, hi, Dana. All right. So, oh my gosh. So Josie said in her educational psychology class, a 600-page textbook had 5 pages on gifted, and it was under learning difficulties. A half a page was how to determine if a child is gifted. Really, really something that our education system struggles with, I know. Okay, Melanie, you say your 10-year-old son has developed anxiety with going outside because there might be bees or wild animals, and if he has medical procedures to the point of full attacks. And then later he feels embarrassed. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little story. First of all, you're not alone. Again, that's where those big worries can manifest themselves and kind of take over without really being completely firmly rooted in reality. Like the likelihood of getting stung by a bee or encountering a wild animal when you're playing loudly in the woods is slim to none. My kids know that too. My 10-year-old daughter is really, really sharp, picks up things really quickly. I cannot get her to go outside half the time in the summer. I wrote a book on backyard science activities, outside, creepy crawly stuff. Like we live this life, and she struggles. We went on a hike when the 17-year cicadas had been emerging, and there were locust shells everywhere. And she was just completely beside herself the whole 1.5-mile hike, because she could look up through the shadows of the leaves and see all these shells, empty shells. And she was just terrified that she would run across like a locust, like it was going to do anything to her. It was an irrational fear, and she just totally did not enjoy anything that we were doing outside. I say baby steps, slowly desensitizing, go outside, be with her, whatever. Learning helps a lot for a lot of these kids. Learning about bees, what the stings do, why they're not likely to sting you, they don't want to, and stuff like that. But I know that there's a lot of words involved in that, and action is a lot harder. So my husband and I have a saying that we say to each other often: water on rock. A good friend of mine used to say that all the time to us, that what we were doing as teachers was a slow, smooth polishing of the kids that we were entrusted with each year, that nobody was going to grow overnight and become the polished being that they're supposed to be overnight. It's just like water in a stream or a river, slowly polishing those stones over years and years and years and years. It's in the moment, you can't see what difference is being made. It takes a really long time to see the fruits of those labors. So just continuing to talk on it again and again and again. But here, true story, so you're not alone. My oldest, and he must have been, 10 or 11 at the time. We had to hold him down to give him his flu shot. We actually don't even get him flu shots anymore. That was the last time we did it, because the screams and terror was so loud they could hear it in the parking lot, and we had to hold him down to get it. It was awful, and it was embarrassing, and it was one of those, like, why am I even choosing to fight this battle? It's not worth it. And so you're not alone in that. Oh, goodness, you're not alone. All right, so let me scroll a little bit here. Keep dropping those questions, and I think I like these kinds of conversations better when I'm answering your specific questions. Anger and meltdowns, Wendy. Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay, so perfectionism. There's a post on my site, Managing Perfectionism. I think that it's really important to teach our kids that striving for perfection, striving for greatness is a good thing. But perfectionism, when it becomes debilitating, is not. That's when we hinder our own learning and our own growth. A book that I used to use with the third graders that I taught was called Mistakes That Worked. And it's a picture book about all the different things that were created by accident: Frisbees, Toll House cookies, Post-it notes, different things that kids would be able to identify with. And then the story behind how they came to be, and that they are a result of someone messing up what they actually set out to do. And then having a discussion, especially with your little one who understands things cognitively at a very high level, that our brain learns by making mistakes. Only by overcoming those mistakes can we learn. We can't grow unless we go out there and put ourselves out there and make mistakes. Go replay some of my first Facebook Lives when you guys couldn't hear me and I had to start over for her. Really, really a good tool for helping kids understand that that nobody's perfect. Talking about how many drafts it takes for a favorite author to get to the point of publication, that nobody writes a perfect first draft, and having her watch you make mistakes. Mess up the next cake you bake. Have it taste terrible. Be like, oh my goodness, I think I put salt in instead of sugar. That was a terrible thing to have happen. Let's throw it away and make another one. Seeing those real life mistakes, even if you made them happen on purpose to prove a point, is a super important lesson and life skill. When I taught that book, Mistakes That Worked, to my students, I was a gifted intervention specialist already. So I would go into all the different second and third grade classrooms and teach different lessons, and that was one of them. When I was getting ready to teach that to all the third graders, before, in preparation for it, I had all the third grade teachers and all the administrators and all the specials teachers share with me an anecdote about some time when they really messed up something. And we posted those with the teachers' names in a big bulletin board in the hallway that everybody in the entire school could see. And then I challenged the students to do the same. And they came up with things that they messed up and what they learned from that mess up. And we put them on that same bulletin board alongside the teachers' mistakes. I think I hear my husband coming home. So we're going to be wrapping this up real soon. Okay. Play therapy. I haven't done, Janae, I haven't done play therapy with my kids, but I've heard a lot of great things about it. And especially for a 4-year-old, I think that would be a great thing to look into. Yeah, okay. So one of the points that Janae just made in her comment is that when they do, she does a lot of those kinds of things that I'm talking about at home. And when he's in the moment, he's not able to implement them. You're absolutely right. So that's where brain research comes into play, right? We're dealing with cortisol spikes during that time. That fight or flight response takes over. And some kids, some adults are better at overcoming that quickly than others. And so when they're in the fight or flight mode, you're not going to be able to reason with him or her. And so by training them to recognize that in themselves and doing something to calm down before acting, we're giving them the tools to be able to do that as they grow. I don't expect a 4-year-old to be able to do it as well as my 14-year-old. And frankly, my 14-year-old's not doing a great job of it oftentimes. And I don't expect him to be able to do it as well as I expect an adult to be able to do it. What we're doing right now is we're building a toolbox of things that they can use when they get in those situations as they grow. So it's not going to be instant. It's going to be, like I just said a few minutes ago, that water on rock. You're going to need to keep trying and keep doing it and really validate those feelings that you saw your kid feel after the fact and talk it through. A calm down corner or a calm down box might be a great resource for your kid to give him a second to calm down before acting and use that as one of the tools. And I see that that post, my friend Jen is helping me drop some links as I talk so you guys can get the resources way quicker than I could get them to you later. But creating a calm down corner is, or calm down area is a really good resource for that. And then a calm down kit is another one. Yeah, exactly, Christy. Gifted teachers get to send gifted kids home at the end of the day, which, I never realized how thankful I was for that until I had my own that I had to live with all day and all night. All right, I'm going to scroll to see if I'm missing any big comments, but we're going to wrap this up. We're getting close to an hour here. Oh, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Viviana? That's really interesting. I like that. Your kiddo, let's see, your daughter is struggling with anxiety with the overload of work at school, considering homeschooling. Okay, there's a lot of questions in there that this is a loaded question to some degree because it brings up strong feelings one way or the other oftentimes in people. She's an honor student, but doesn't have any time for anything else. And this breaks my heart that she went to a summer camp for gifted and wishes that her school was like that. Yeah, I do too. I wish that we had more school opportunities for that. There's a gifted school in our area that wasn't an option for us when we first pulled our kid out, but I wish that everybody had a school like it. So the short answer is I think that homeschooling is a phenomenal option for gifted children, particularly those who, like your daughter, is mastering subjects quickly and easily and is being weighted down by the busy work of it and is struggling with anxiety and other issues because of that. Do I think it's the right option for everybody? No. Do I think it is an amazing option for gifted kids? Yes, and here's why. With homeschooling, you have the opportunity to tailor your kids' education specifically and related and like directly related to their abilities, their personalities, and their special needs. So you can take your kiddo right where they are in every area, socially, emotionally, academically, passion wise, like, whatever they're passionately interested in, and you can tap into those interests and those struggles and move them forward in every way. I think it's an amazing option. I don't think it's the easiest option. In some ways it is, because you don't have to deal with the bureaucracy of other places. You don't have to deal with the red tape. You don't have to check all the boxes. You can just do what you know in your heart is what's best. But it requires you to do all that planning and all that teaching and all that other stuff too. And it's tiring. It's really tiring. I said in a talk a couple weekends ago that homeschooling is parenting on steroids. You get all the ups and all the downs that you do as a parent, and you get it all the time. So if you're considering it, it's really, really important to make sure that you're considering how to take care of yourself in that. I just had a conversation with a friend via Messenger about this very issue. When we're talking about intense kids, when we're talking about homeschooling them, we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as well, so that we can give them the very best that they need in those situations. I think it's a very good option. I think it's a very great option. I'm working on some resources to help people who are going down that path, to tackle it with the best preparation possible. And I have, posts about that, and would be happy to talk to you if you want, ask questions on the site, or go into the Raising Poppies group and ask questions. I do think it's a great option, especially if you're seeing that it might be a need. And then so Tracy says that it was her life too, and it was the best choice that she's made. Bees. And Jennifer says that her kids love homeschooling because they can work at their own pace. So I have a post on my site. It was done a couple years ago. The top 10 things I love about homeschooling from a gifted kid's perspective. And it was a post that my son helped me write about what he loved about homeschooling. And so you can go read that and see what great things there are about it in that respect. But like I said, I'm biased. I think that if you are lucky enough to have a really great setup for gifted kids in your area, then enjoy that and take every advantage you can of it. But if you're not, then I think homeschooling is an amazing option for gifted kids. Melissa, okay. With respect to anxiety, okay. Okay, so Melissa has a really good point. I love when Melissa pipes in here. Thanks for being here. I miss you too. Okay, so she says, wanted to say a quick thing. With respect to supporting kids with anxiety, one of the psychologists that she's worked with emphasized validating and acknowledging worry feelings, but then don't get stuck there. Say that sounds like a worry thought, and then talk about all of the cognitive techniques that you've practiced to move past that stuck thought and move it along. Dan Peters' book, so she's talking about the same book that I recommended earlier, that one that I said was a great one, Make Your Worrier a Warrior, talks a lot about that technique. Pulling in the metacognition. So we did that with our psychologist as well too. That metacognition is thinking about your thinking, understanding and analyzing your own thought processes, and teaching our kids to think about what they're thinking and how they're thinking about it, and then moving past those thoughts. So thank you for validating that book and that technique. And choosing a psychologist. Not all pediatricians are well-versed in mental health, but some are, and can be a good resource for finding a psychologist. The child psychologist that they're working with has become one of her favorite people. Not a gifted specialist, but specializes in anxious and temperamentally inflexible kids, and is highly gifted himself. So what I'll say about that, Melissa, is that having that knowing how his own brain works probably helped that too. And that temperamentally inflexible kid is oftentimes a trait of giftedness as well. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. All right, okay, so it is, we're approaching an hour. There are some conversations that I didn't get to yet. I'm going to scroll really quickly here, sign off in a minute, and then I'm going to go back and answer some of those questions in writing. because I don't want to keep you. I can see our numbers are dwindling. Okay. Hi, you're fine. My husband's home, so yeah, you don't have to. It's not a podcast. And he stayed away so I could talk, and then I'm running over. So, all right, there's a whole bunch. Actually, nope, there's not. So Carly says you're not homeschooling now because of a chronic illness. I'm sorry, that's such a tough thing. Her oldest is in the gifted program because her friends aren't in it. So her question is dropping out of the gifted program worth it because of the anxiety? I would say that's an individual call, but it's going to depend mostly on what she's getting out of it. So if it's really valuable academically and dropping back down is going to affect her negatively, then I would want to seriously consider finding ways to get her more time with her peers and her friends. But if it's extra work that's not necessarily different work, then it's worth considering. I would say talk to the school psychologist about that, talk to the gifted specialist, and talk to the individual teachers, because they'd probably be able to give you some good insight specifically related to her and her personality in that one. All right, so I'm going to go now, but you can keep dropping questions in the comments of this particular video. The replay will be up as soon as it finishes off the recording, and I'll pop back in later this evening after I say hi to my husband, who was patiently tiptoeing past, and check back in with you and drop more resources as I find them. If we want to talk more about anxiety, we can talk another live about that. So let me know if you want to do that too. And then keep those questions coming. All right. You're doing a great job. Remember that though. You guys are all here. You're asking questions. You're finding out more information and resources to help your kids. It's amazing. Keep that up and keep positive. You're doing a great, great job. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. I will talk to you guys soon.